What's up? What's up? I hope y'all are doing well. Hope you are blessed. I hope you enjoyed everything that's been great. But it's time to get back into the research. It's time to figure out what is Hue Hue Tlapalan, why it's not been mentioned, what's going on here within North Central and South America, and just how far it dates back. So first off, in this one, we're going to be in the historical data from ancient records and ruins of Mexico and Central America. And this is going to be by Louis E. Hills. Let's see when this was printed, y'all. See if we can get a printout. Look at this guy. Louis E. Hills. All right, brother. So it's a historical data from ancient records and ruins of Mexico and Central America by Louis Hills out of Independence, Missouri. This was only 50 cents back in the days, y'all. But the copyright's in 1919. So we got it here. Then the 21st century, or the 20th century, excuse me. Let's read this real quick. It says, your short work on the Popol Vuh, we've read and believe it to be true of primitive people who crossed the seas in ancient records called quinames and Nahuatl history plainly told in Toltec records 2,000 years old. Error always opposes truth. You'll meet opposition, but when forsooth, live on, fight on, we'll help you through. We'll all subscribe for volume 2. Watch out. So that's cool. If y'all want to read this one's easily, you can find this one easy, but we are going to go straight into Tlapalan. So for the first mention of it is within page 7 right here. I wanted to check out this quick map. So looking at this map here, it says 3 ancient colonies that came to America. The Nahuatls crossed the Pacific, it says, in 591 BC. So it's wanting to say that that they crossed or came from somewhere else. And it's always the case. Always the case. So it says the quinames crossed the Atlantic about 2234 BC, landing in Mexico, landing in Salvador, CA. The Olmecs crossed the Atlantic in 588 BC, landing in Mexico. So they're always saying that someone crossed. They're saying that right here, the Nahuatls and the Mayas came from across. It's looking like what he's saying is that they came from Jerusalem. It's also looking like he's saying that the Olmecs came from Arabia and Jerusalem as well. And it's saying that the course of the quinames came from Europe as well. We already know what's up. America is the true old world. But I'm sure there's some gems in here, right? So we're going to go through these gems. Let's get to it. So again, on page 7, locations and descriptions, talking about the quinames. The quinames, the people of the primitive colony, were called quinames or giants in the traditions because they knew of them as a race large and powerful men. So the quinames, large race, super big people. We already know about giants. This isn't just a tradition. We found bones. So it says the Quiche traditions. The Quiche Indians of Guatemala, in their traditions, say the primitive people or the first colony were in the distant east beyond immense seas and lands, that they crossed the sea in 7 barks or ships and disembarked at Panunco in the Panunco River near Tampico, Mexico. It is not stated from whence they came, but merely that they came out of the regions where the sun rises or from the east. So here we go again. Right off the bat, it goes from they came from far distant seas. You know, we had seas in America. Don't let me get to start showing y'all some more maps. Our landmass looked completely different, but that the aspect that they came from the east, not that they came from Europe. So why throw in that conjecture? So let's keep going. From the Nahuatl records, quote, at the end of the first age of the world, the first age, at the end of it, okay, as we are told by Ixtlilxochitl, the earth was visited by a flood which covered the most lofty mountains. After the repeopling of the earth by the descendants of a few families who escaped the destruction. And again, right up here, they talked about the 7, right? The 7 barks or ships. Always 7, right? Cool, let's keep going. After repeopling of the earth by the descendants of a few families who escaped destruction, at the building of a tower and the confusion of tongues, and consequent scattering of the population. For all these things were found in the native traditions, as we are informed." Unquote. 7 families speaking the same language kept together in their wanderings for many years. After crossing broad lands and seas, enduring great hardships, they reached Tamoachan, or Hue Hue Tlapalan. So you see here, Tlapalan is spelled with 2 L's, and then of course it relates back to Tamoachan. Okay? Footnote: the date of the arrival of this primitive colony in Hue Hue Tlapalan is given by Ixtlilo, so Chittle, as 520 years after the flood. And check it out. Again, we have another 7 in numerology by adding the 5, 2, and 0. Okay? Torquemada's account of the primitive colony, I condense. Certain people came by sea to Panuco. From Panuco, they passed on by degrees and built Tula. From there, they passed on and built Cholula. Here, these people renamed and multiplied and sent colonies to people Upper and Lower Mixteca and Zapotecan country. And these, it is said, raised the grand edifices whose remains are still to be seen at Mictlan or Mitla. Okay, here we go. Who they mentioning? Who they always mentioning everywhere we go. The able Brazier, in one part of his writings, expresses the opinion that Mitla was built by people from Cholula. It will be apparent to the reader that the ruins at Mitla bear no resemblance whatever to other Oaxacan monuments. The history of the ancient Americas is not altogether traditional, but was handed down in their writings over 2,000 years. Okay? So we're going to keep going. We can go into these giants or quinamis at a different point, but right now we are on Tlapalan. Okay, so let's head back up. Nahuatl history by the Toltecs. I now come to what may be termed the regular annals of that branch of the Nahuatl nations, which acquired the name of Toltec. Toltec. What are we talking about here? Toltec. Root race? Yes, sir. Subgroup? Yes, sir. Of the Atlanteans? Yes, sir. Mr. Bancroft says, quote, by the omission of a large amount of profitless conjecture, the traditions may be somewhat simplified as to yield, as other traditions have done, some items of general information respecting the primitive Nahuatl period, unquote. Then follows a brief account of the coming of the quinamis or giants from the Tower of Babel and their destruction, which was Olmec history, recorded in the annals of the Nahuatls after they united about 200 BC. So it says the what? The Olmec history, which Olmecs did not call themselves Olmecs. That is a term that came in the 19th century. We just went over this in Carameo's most recent Olmec video. It's going through the history of the Olmecs, breaking it down. But recorded, again, the Olmec history was recorded in the annals of the Nahuatls after they united about 200 BC. So again, we got to watch out with their chronology on how they are putting things together. Don't give so much credit to the actual dates, but understand that we can get somewhere as far as our understanding by looking at the dates that they are giving. We next note an account of an assembly of the wise men in Hue Hue Tlapalan. You hear that? We've already gone through this. The wise men in Hue Hue Tlapalan to do what? To put together the calendar, okay? This city is thought by some to be the holy city, the ruins of which are at Palenque, Chiapas, Mexico, okay? So now they're bringing it back down to Mexico in relation to Hue Hue Tlapalan in this aspect here. The chief city of their dominion at that time. It was at this assembly, 83 BC, that they added the bisextile, or a leap year, to regulate the solar year with the equinox. So we can clearly see with more detail now that the leap year was added in Hue Hue Tlapalan to regulate the solar year with the equinox. Okay, now we're not going to go into the Great Cataclysm right now. That's going to be something that we're going to be diving into here in a little bit. One more of references in relation to Tlapalan here within the historical data from ancient records and ruins of Mexico and Central America, which is on page 34. And this book's got a lot of good drop, y'all. If y'all want to learn about what was going on here in America, this is a great book to kind of dive through and grab some gems. The record of their destruction. Quote, they were gathered together in a general assembly composed of all the priests, princes, and considerable lords in a place called Teotihuacan, which is in a district a short distance north of the present city of Mexico. Then follows a relation of tales in which the Toltecs or Nahuals were smitten day after day with terrible destruction by a vast multitude of their enemies until they scattered in different directions, east, west, north, and south. The date given by Ixtli Xochitl of the Toltec or Nahual banishment from their country and the migrating to Hue Hue or Hue Tlapalan, California as 387 AD, and centuries later returned again to the Valley of Mexico. Their history says 648 AD and have been known as Toltecs since. I am very sure this statement of the overthrow of the Nahuals as a nation, which would include the Olmecs and the Calancas, who were then a part of that nation as given by Ixtli Xochitl, as in his translation from the Toltec's record, is true history, and the date 387 is comparatively correct, and some of the Olmecs and the Calancas who fled to their seaport, the Calanco, on the Gulf, just below Veracruz of the present day, sailed to South America as Portorini said about 387 AD. Check it. They were driven from Chiapas and Tabasco, and their migrations began under the leadership of Hue Man. Where do we get the term human from? In 338 AD. So we are told. Then follows a long description of their journeys with families in stock, the men continually fighting off the Maya armies until they finally reached the Valley of Mexico, where they were destroyed as a nation, 387 AD. And the few who were left scattered north, south, and east and west, some of them to return again to the Valley of Mexico in 648 AD, and then known as Toltecs. Okay? Now, jumping into this No Man Knows His History, or so he says, Joseph Smith's History Vault. The Divine Origin of the Book of Mormon from the Contributor, the 1881 series by Elder Moses Thatcher. Okay, so as you can see here, this was a magazine. As we can see in this magazine, talking about some Mormon stuff, right? So let's get into it. So, from the 8th volume, pages 25 and 27 of Kingsborough's Mexican Antiquities, we quote the following, quote, Don Francisco Munoz de la Vega, the bishop of that diocese, Chiapa, certifies in the prologue to his diocesan constitutions declaring that an ancient manuscript of the primitive Indians of that province who had learned the art of writing was in his record office, who retained the constant tradition that the father and founder of their nation was named Tiponahuale, which signifies the Lord of the hollow piece of wood. The Lord of the hollow piece of wood. And that he was present at the building of the Great Wall, for so they named the Tower of Babel. And behold, with his own eyes the confusion of language, after which event God, the Creator, commanded him to come to these extensive regions and to divide them amongst mankind. They affirm that at the time of the confusion of tongues, there were 7 families who spoke the same language, which was Nahuatl. What? Nahuatl. Again, 7 families, that which is still spoken by the Mexicans or Aztecs, and since they understood each other, they united, and forming a single company, proceeded on their journey through diverse lands and countries as chance directed them, and without any particular destination in search of a convenient habitation, and having traveled during a century, which amongst them was a period of time amounting to 104 years, passing in the interval mountains, rivers, and arms of the sea, which they noted down in their paintings. They arrived at a place where they made their first settlement in the northern part of this kingdom, which they called Tlapalan, which signifies the red country, on account of the soil being of that color. And even still, in all modern maps, picture writings, they gave the name of the Red Sea to the Gulf, which is situated between the eastern coast of the province of New Mexico and Sonora, and the river Colorado, which flows in the northern part of the Gulf, is named the Red River. To my mind, there is something remarkable in this name, Tlapalan, as signifying red country, for the Hue Hue Tlapalan appears to be the original land from whence came the different colonies that inhabited and peopled America in the early ages. Hue Hue meaning old, thus we would say Hue Hue Tlapalan, old or original red country. Now, we may reasonably suppose that the country, at least in the vicinity of the Red Sea, is of a similar color, and Josephus says this man was called Adam, which in the Hebrew tongue signifies one that is red, because he was formed out of the earth, compounded together. For of that kind is virgin true earth, unquote, which is in chapter 1, 2 Antiquities of the Jews. According to this authority, then, we learn that virgin true earth was originally red. Hence, as I view the matter, we have a very natural foundation for the word Tlapalan, red country, as applied to that land in the vicinity of the Gulf of California, and for Hue Hue Tlapalan as applied to the original land beyond the seas, from whence came the primitive inhabitants of America. Now, coming into this section here on some public articles, the Toltec, the meaning of, article on, from Warrior's Journeys. Okay, this is a Toltec, the meaning of, article on. So this is going to be on Toltec-legacy.com. Again, it's a public article. Searching up some Hue Hue Tlapalan. So our first reference actually to this is going to be here where it says Charles A. Shook, 1876 through 1939, in his book Cumorah Revisited, takes the matter further. Quote, with this century, 6th, we have the advent of the Toltecs in Mexico. They were a Nahuan tribe, and the most prominent representative of that people's culture of which we have any record. The unanimous testimony of tradition is that they came from the north, from the mysterious Hue Hue Tlapalan, old red land, the nursery or birthplace of the Nahua people, not somewhere else, but the nursery or birthplace, which has been variously located. Briart, located near Lake Tulare in California, so a settlement there, okay. Becker on the Rio Colorado, and Baldwin, Short, and Foster in the Mississippi Valley. Let's go. Who else supports the Mississippi Valley? Boberg. And who is the deepest and one translating all of the text of these people? Boberg. Okay, let's keep going. How did these Toltecs arrive there? In Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly, we find the following account. The native Mexican historian Ixtlil Xochitl gave this as the Toltec legend of the flood. It is found in the histories of the Toltecs that this age and first world, as they called it, lasted 1,716 years, that men were destroyed by tremendous rains and lightning from the sky, and even all the land, without the exception of anything, and the highest mountains were covered up and submerged in water 15 cubits. And here they added other fables of how men came to multiply from the few who escaped from this destruction in a Toupee, that this word nearly signifies a closed chest, and how, after men had multiplied, they erected a very high zacuali, or zicali, or teocali, okay, which is today a tower of great height, in order to take refuge in it should the second world or age be destroyed. Presently their languages were confused, and, not being able to understand each other, they went different parts of the earth. The Toltecs, consisting of 7 friends, there we go again, 7 friends turns into 7 families, but what was it originally? with their wives, who understood the same language, came to these parts having first passed great land and seas, having lived in caves, and having endured great hardships in order to reach this land. They wandered 104 years through different parts of the world before they reached Hue Hue Tlapalan, which was in Peru, 520 years after the flood. Okay? Now, something that came up in relation to the research on Hue Hue Tlapalan, what I came across was the aspect that there was a secret language that was being used, a different language. This language was called Sinar. So I just wanted to touch base on this language real quick for any of y'all who are doing any more research behind me to kind of present some of these things or bring some of these things together in your research. So it says the Sinar, the language of the sun based on symbolism and closely associated with sound, light, color, and number. Currently, Sinar is a secret sacerdotal language of the great teachers and their disciples all over the world. It is taught in the secret schools of the East. In the ancient past, there was one body of knowledge and one universal language, Sinar. From the beginning of human evolution, they were transmitted from generation to generation. Yet during the times of Atlantis, when humanity fell into sin, this language, along with eternal knowledge, ceased to be available to posterity. All nations restricted themselves to their own national tongues and lost their connection with the secret wisdom, forgetting the one language. Humanity was no longer worthy of such knowledge, so instead of being universal, Sinar became limited to just a few. The biblical myth of the Tower of Babel and the similar legends around the world symbolically testify to that enforced secrecy, narrating the story when the Lord created several languages from the original one language, so that sinners could no longer understand one another's speech. In mythology, Sinar is often referred to as the language of the birds. The tongues, and if you think about this, we see a lot of bird-headed people. Bird-headed people. The tongues of all the peoples through the ages have their origins in Sinar. Thus, the roots of many current Eastern languages from the Sanskrit, which is based on Sinar. Many words of this most ancient language underlie not only Sanskrit, but also Egyptian, Hebrew, Latin, and other languages of various known and yet to be discovered sacred texts. Thus, Sinar is similar to the roots that nourish a single tree, and languages compose its crown, which is beautiful in its diversity. The language of Sinar consists of many levels, having both spoken and written forms of speech, which are significantly different from traditional understanding. It is also distinct from others in that it has no obsolete or ingrained forms of expression, being rather succinct. It is able to most fully and concisely express any thought, including Hue, sophisticated phenomenon. Its highest manifestations are closest to the voice of silence and include thought forms, the breathing of fires, the geometric expression of combinations of rays, and so on, whereas its lowest manifestations resemble traditional writing systems, each with its own specific rules. The writing system of Sinar combines seemingly incompatible elements. These include signs, syllables, and letters based on symbolism. A single symbol is capable of developing into an entire treatise, easily comprehended by an initiated disciple of any ethnic background. Now, what I want you to kind of realize here when I'm speaking of this is, what does it remind you of? All of our symbols that we're going through in relation to the glyphs that we're finding and going through in Brazier de Bird's work, this is all very similar. And why do you think it's being related to Hue Hue Tlapalan in our Toltecs in the first place? Mysterious, right? Not so much. But the reader's level of consciousness is also important. Color, light, number, and sound play a significant role in its alphabet, from which words and sentences are composed. Each letter possessing its own specific color of the rainbow, shade of light, number, and mystic sound, syllable, has its equivalent in the languages of all peoples of the world and may be reproduced using different cryptographic methods with the aid of specialized calculation tables. Thus, a new cryptographic alphabet is created in a given tongue, while numerological and geometrical and astrological keys help. And then we're blocked out from viewing any more on this one. Okay? So, here within the story of Atlantis by W. Scott Elliott, I did want to point this out real quick just because we've been speaking about one language, the Nahuatl. before everything was confused. And it says here on page 10 in the story of Atlantis, Atlantis, as we shall see, is said to have been inhabited by red, yellow, white, and black races. It is now proved by the researchers of Le Plagien, the Quadriphages, Bancroft, and others that black populations of Negroid type existed even up to recent times in America. Many of the monuments of Central America are decorated with Negro faces, and some of the idols found there are clearly intended to represent Negroes with small skulls, short, woolly hair, and thick lips. The Popol Vuh, which we've been going through, speaking of the first home of the Guatemalan race, says that black and white men together lived in this happy land in great peace, speaking one language. The Popol Vuh goes on to relate how the people migrated from their ancestral home, how their language became altered, and how some went to the east while others traveled west to Central America. Now, came from where? Their ancestral home. Where's their ancestral home? Hue Hue Tlapalan. One more thing I wanted to mention right here, and this is going to be on page 11, okay? It says a remarkable fact about the American Indians, and one which is a standing puzzle to ethnologists, is the wide range of color and complexion to be found among them, from the white tint of the Menominee, Dakota, Mandan, and Zuni tribes, many of whom have auburn hair and blue eyes, to the almost Negro blackness of the Garros of Kansas, and the now extinct tribes of California. They say extinct, okay. The Indian races run through every shade of red-brown, copper, olive, cinnamon, and bronze. Diving into this book of the myths of Mexico and Peru. Check it out. Look at that painting. The princess is given a vision, it says. So the myths of Mexico and Peru by Louis Spence, okay, author of the mythologies of ancient Mexico and Peru, the Popol Vuh, the civilization of ancient Mexico, a dictionary of mythology, with 60 full-page illustrations mainly by Gilbert James and William Sewell, and other drawings and maps. Okay, so diving into the myths of the Toltecs. But we enter a much more fascinating domain when we come to peruse the myths regarding the Toltec kingdom and civilization, for before entering upon the origin or veritable history of the Toltec race, it will be better to consider the native legends concerning them. These exhibit an almost oriental exuberance of imagination and coloring, and forcibly remind the reader of the gorgeous architectural and scenic descriptions in the Arabian Nights. The principal sources of these legends are the histories of Zumarraga and Xochitl. The latter is by no means a satisfactory authority, but he has succeeded in investing the traditions of his native land with no inconsiderable degree of charm. The Toltecs, he says, founded the magnificent city of Talan in the year 566 of the Incarnation. This city, the site of which is now occupied by the modern town of Tula, was situated northwest of the mountains which bound the Mexican Valley. Thither were the Toltecs, guided by the powerful necromancer Hue Hue Great Hand, and under his direction they decided to build a city upon the site of what had been their place of bivouac. For 6 years they toiled at the building of Talan, and magnificent edifices, palaces, and temples arose, the whole forming a capital of splendor unparalleled in the New World, which is really old, okay? So we have Hue the Wicked, okay? Hue the Wicked. So we'll dive into that. Hue the Wicked. A succession of more or less able kings succeeded the founder of the Toltec monarchy until in AD 994, Hue II ascended the throne of Talan. He ruled first with wisdom and paid great attention to the duties of the state and religion, but later he fell from the high place he had made for himself in the regard of the people by his faithless deception of them and his intemperate and licentious habits. The provinces rose in revolt, and many signs and gloomy omens foretold the downfall of the city. Tovello, okay? Tovello. Tovia. We have a lot of Tovio that is being referenced here. Different spellings, but we can see that it's one and the same. So let's continue. Toveo, a cunning sorcerer, collected a great concourse of people near Talan, and by dint of beating upon a magic drum until the darkest hours of the night, forced them to dance to its sound until, exhausted by their efforts, they fell headlong over a dizzy precipice into a deep ravine, where they were turned into stone. Toveo also maliciously destroyed a stone bridge, so that thousands of people fell into the river beneath and were drowned. The neighboring volcanoes burst into eruption, presenting a frightful aspect, and grisly apparitions could be seen among the flames, threatening the city with terrible gestures of menace. Now, this is going to be in relation to some translations that we're going through in Berg's work as well. The rulers of Talan resolved to lose no time in placing the gods, whom they decided from the portents must have conceived the most violent wrath against their capital. They therefore ordained a great sacrifice of war captives, but upon the first of the victims being placed upon the altar, a still more terrible catastrophe occurred. In the method of a sacrifice common to the Nahual race, the breast of a youth was opened for the purpose of extracting the heart, but no such organ could the officiating priest perceive. Moreover, the veins of the victim were bloodless. Such a deadly odor was exhaled from the corpse that a terrible pestilence arose, which caused the death of thousands of Toltecs. Humok, the unrighteous monarch who had brought all this suffering upon his folk, was confronted in the forest by the Tlalocs. By who? The Tlalocs, or gods of moisture, and humbly petitioned these deities to spare him, and not to take from him his wealth and rank. So this is important because it straight up tells you Tlalocs, or the gods of moisture. Again, the gods are personifications of nature itself, okay? And that's what we need, or at least me myself have come to understand very recently, and which you should as well, that they were personifications of nature. But the gods were disgusted at the callous selfishness displayed in his desires and departed, threatening the Toltec race with 6 years of plagues. Now diving into the Mexican race. The race which was responsible for this varied and highly colored civilization was that known as the Nahual, those who lived by rule, a title adopted by them to distinguish them from those tribes who still roamed in an unsettled condition over the contiguous plains of New Mexico and the more northerly tracts. This term was employed by them to designate the race as a whole, but it was composed of many diverse elements, the characteristics of which were rendered still more various by the adoption into one or other of the tribes which composed it of surrounding aboriginal peoples. Much controversy has raged round the question regarding the original home of the Nahual, but their migration legends consistently point to a northern origin. Haha, let's go! And when the close affinity between the art forms and mythology of the present-day natives of British Columbia and those of the Nahual comes to be considered along with very persistent legends of a prolonged pilgrimage from the north, where they dwelt in a place by the water, by the Mississippi, by the Nile. The conclusion that the Nahual emanated from the region indicated is well nigh irresistible. In Nahual traditions, the name of the locality whence the race commenced its wanderings is called Aztlan, the place of reeds. But this place name is of little or no value as a guide to any given region, though probably every spot betwixt Bering Strait and Mexico has been identified with it by zealous antiquarians. Other names discovered in the migration legends are Tlapalan, the country of bright colors, and Chicomostoc, the 7 caves, and these may perhaps be identified with New Mexico or Arizona. Okay, so he's maybe, perhaps, again, so at least we're coming back up to North America. Okay, New Mexico, Arizona, the Ohio, Mississippi Valley. Again, for the present, we must regard the Toltecs merely as a race alluded to in a migration myth as the first Nahual immigrants to the region of Mexico. Ixtlilxochitl, a native chronicler who flourished shortly after the Spanish conquest of Mexico, gives two separate accounts of the early Toltec migration, the first of which goes back to the period of their arrival in the fabled land, it's not fabled, of Tlapalan, alluded to above. In this account, Tlapalan is described as a region near the sea, which the Toltecs reached by voyaging southward, skirting the coasts of California. This account must be received with the greatest caution, though, but we know that the natives of British Columbia have been expert in the use of the canoe from the early period, and that the Mexican god Quetzalcoatl, who is probably originally derived from a common source with their deity Yero, is represented as being skilled in the management of the craft. The Toltec upheaval, another quote. Like nearly all legendary immigrants, the Toltecs did not set out to colonize distant countries from any impulse of their own, but were the victims of internecine dissension in the homeland and were expelled from the community to seek their fortunes elsewhere. Thus, thrust forth, they set their faces southward and reached Tlapalan in the year 1 Tecparo, AD 387, passing the country of Salisco. They effected a landing at Huatulco and journeyed down the coast until they reached Tochtepec, whence they pushed inland to Tolancinco. In this, he recounts how the chiefs of Tlapalan, who had revolted against the royal power, were banished from that region in AD 439. Lingering near the ancient territory for the space of 8 years, they then journeyed to Tlapalancinco, where they halted for 3 years before setting out on a prolonged pilgrimage which occupied the tribe for over a century, and in the course of which it halted at no less than 13 different resting places, 6 of which can be traced to stations on the Pacific coast, and the remainder of localities in the north of Mexico. Now, the Toltecs were so tormented by the enchantments of Tezcatlipoca that it was soon apparent to them that their fortunes were on the wane, and that the end of their empire was at hand. Quetzalcoatl, chagrined at the turn things had taken, resolved to quit Talan and go to the country of Tlapalan, whence he had come on his civilizing mission to Mexico. Now, here on the departure of Quetzalcoatl, which we've gone over quite a bit, but we're still gonna, in all these different books we have to relate all these things. So it says, "Where did you go?" they asked him. "Why do you leave your capital?" Quetzalcoatl replied, "I go to Tlapalan, whence I came from." "For what reason?" persisted the enchanters. "My father, the sun, has called me thence," replied Quetzalcoatl. "Go then happily," they said, "but leave us the secret of your art, the secret of founding in silver, of working in precious stones and woods, of painting, and of feather working, and other matters." But Quetzalcoatl refused, and cast all his treasures into the fountain of Cozcapa, water of precious stones. At Cochtan, he was met by another enchanter who asked him whither he was bound, and on learning his destination, proffered him a drink of wine. So see, this is going back into it. So we can see how, as we're going through a lot of different versions of Quetzalcoatl, we see more and more details that you kind of have to put all together because a lot of details have been left out. So he regretted this misfortune exceedingly and wept, laminating their fate with most bitter tears and mournful songs. On reaching the summit of Mount Poya Tecaro, he slid to the base. Arriving at the seashore, he embarked upon a raft of serpents and was wafted away toward the land of Tlapalan. Another reference here within this book, the magicians nonplussed at these unexpected happenings begged him to return, but he refused on the ground that the sun required his presence. He proceeded to Tabasco, the fabled land of Tlapalan, and embarking upon a raft made of serpents floated away to the east. A slightly different version of this myth has already been given. So, legend of the creation on Ixtlioxochitl. Okay, one of the most complete creation stories in Mexican mythology is that given by the half-blood Indian author Ixtlioxochitl, who, we cannot doubt, received it directly from native sources. He states that the Toltecs credited a certain Tloque Nahuaque, Lord of all existence. Okay, so Tloque Nahuaque, Lord of all existence, with the creation of the universe, the stars, mountains, and animals. So what the god is, and he states that the Toltecs, their name for the Most High, was Tloque na Huake, Lord of all existence, of everything. So their supreme source, their supreme God, number one, Most High, was Tloque na Huake. At the same time, he made the first man and woman, from whom all the inhabitants of the earth are descended. This first earth was destroyed by the water sun. At the commencement of the next epoch, the Toltecs appeared, and after many wanderings settled in Hue Hue Tlapalan, very old Tlapalan. Then followed the second catastrophe, that of the wind sun. The remainder of the legend recounts how mighty earthquakes shook the world and destroyed the earth giants. These earth giants, we already know, quinames, were analogous to the Greek titans and were a source of the great uneasiness to the Toltecs. In the opinion of the old historians, they were descended from the races who inhabited the more northerly portion of Mexico. Boom, boom, watch out, that's a pow pow on them boys, okay? So, jumping into this book here, The Myths of the New World, a treatise on the symbolism and mythology of the red race of America by Daniel G. Britton. And this one was published in 1868. So it says, member of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, of the Numismatic and Antiquarian Society of Philadelphia, corresponding member of the American Ethnological Society, author of the Notes on the Florida Peninsula. Okay, so jumping right into it in relation to Tlapalan. Says, this land of riches and plenty, where the gourds grow an arm's length across, where an ear of corn is a load for a stout man, and its stalks are as high as trees, land where the cotton ripens of its own accord, of all rich tints, land abounding with limpid emeralds, turquoises, gold, and silver. This land was also called Tlalocan, from Tlaloc, the god of rain, or as we just went through, the god of moisture, okay, all around in all its forms, who there had his dwelling place, and Tlapalan, the land of colors, or the red land, for the hues of the sky at sunrise floated over it. Its inhabitants were surnamed children of the air, or of Quetzalcoatl, so not just one person, but a nation of Quetzalcoatls, and from its center rose the holy mountain Tonacatepec, okay, the mountain of our life or subsistence. Its supposed location was in the east, where in that country blow the winds that bring mild rains, says Sahagun, and that missionary was himself asked as coming from the east, whether his home was in Tlapalan, and more definitely by some was situated among the lofty peaks on the frontiers of Guatemala, and all the great rivers that water the earth were supposed to have their sources there. But here, as elsewhere, its site was not determined. There is a Talan, says an ancient authority, where the sun rises, and there is another in the land of shades, and another where the sun reposes, and thence came we, and still another where the sun reposes, and there dwells God. The myth of the Quiches but changes the name of this pleasant land. With them it was Pan Paxil Pa Kayala, where the waters divide and falling, or between the waters parcelled out and mucky. This was an excellent land, full of pleasant things, where was store of white corn and yellow corn, where one could not count the fruits, nor estimate the quantity of the honey and food. Over it ruled the Lord of the air, and from it the 4 sacred animals carried the corn to make the flesh of men. Okay? Beautiful there. I wanted to check out this footnote. Let's see if we got anything good in here. Okay, yeah, we do. Memorial de Tecpan Atitlan in Brazil. History of the Mexicos. The derivation of Tulan or Tule is extremely uncertain. Mr. Brazil de Baberg sees it in the Ultima Thule of the ancient geographers, which suits his idea of early American history. Hernando de Soto found a village of this name on the Mississippi, or near it. There we go, baby. There we go. You already know what's up, okay? But on looking into Gallatin's vocabulary, Tula turns out to be the Choctaw word for stone, and as De Soto was then in the Choctaw County, the coincidence is explained at once. Bushman, who spells it Talan, takes it from Talan, a rush, and translates. Those who have attempted to make history from these mythological fables have been much puzzled about the location of this mystic land. Humboldt has placed it on the northwest coast, Cabrera Palenque, Clavijero, north of Anahuac, etc., etc. Atlan, literally, the White Land, is another name of wholly mythical purport, which it would be equally vain to seek on the terrestrial globe. So, when they speaking of White Land, they're not necessarily speaking of a terrestrial aspect, but more or less, but more towards, should I say, a higher celestial location, okay? Which it would be equally vain to seek on the terrestrial globe. In the extract in the text, the word translated God is Quabavil, an old word for the highest God, either from a root meaning to open, to disclose, or from a similar form signifying to wonder, to marvel, literally, therefore, the revealer, or the wondrous one. So here we go. Speaking of on page 181, speaking of the myth of Quetzalcoatl, his emblematic name, the bird serpent, and his rebus and cross at Palenque, I have already explained. Others of his titles were Ehecaro, the air, Yolcuat, the rattlesnake, Tolhil, the rumbler, Huemoc, the strong hand, Nani, he, Hecaro, Lord of the Four Winds. The same dualism reappears in him that has been noted in his Anagalus elsewhere. He is both Lord of the Eastern Light and the Winds. Morning Star? What we talking about? As the former, he was born of a virgin in the land of Tula, or Tlapalan, in the distant Orient, and was high priest of that happy realm. The morning star was his symbol, there it is, and the temple of Cholula was dedicated to him expressly as the author of light. As by days we can measure time, he was the alleged inventor of the calendar. Well, that's kind of strange because I thought we had the, alright, we're gonna keep going right now. I ain't even gonna dive into that. Like all the Dawn heroes, he too was represented as of white complexion, clothed in long white robes, and, as most of the Aztec gods, with a full and flowing beard. When his earthly work was done, he too returned to the east, assigning as a reason that the sun, the ruler of Tlapalan, demanded. Okay, watch out. His presence. But the real motive was that he had been overcome by Tezcatlipoca, otherwise called Yaoli Hecaro, the wind or spirit of night, who had descended from heaven by a spider's web and presented his rival with a drought pretended to confer immortality, but in fact producing uncontrollable longing for home. Now in the book A Trip to Mexico, which is illustrated, as it says. Oh, beautiful. Look at that, man. In its original location, I'm assuming, where it was found. Man, look at that thing. Woo! Tough. The Aztec calendar stone. Where was it built, y'all? Where was it made? Amazing. So a trip to Mexico being notes of a journey from Lake Erie to, Lake Erie to Lake Texcoco and back, with an appendix containing and being a paper about the ancient nations and races who inhabited Mexico before and at the same time of the Spanish conquest, and the ancient stone and other structures and ruins of the ancient cities found there by H.C.R. Beecher. Okay, and this was in 1883. Watch out. Okay. So zooming in, going straight to Hue Hue Tlapalan, we're in the appendix. It says, the mountainous region of Mexico, like the Caucasus. Like what? Like the Caucasus? What? Was inhabited from the most remote period by a great number of nations of different races, okay? The most ancient nations of Mexico, those who considered themselves as autochtones, are the Olmecs, or Hulmecs, the Zicalancs, the Corres, the Tepanecs, the Tarascas, the Mixtecs, the Tazpotecs, and the Otomites. The Olmecs and the Zicalancs, who inhabited the elevated plain of Tlaxcala, boasted of having vanquished or destroyed on their arrival the giants, or quinam, a tradition founded probably on the appearances of the fossil bones of elephants found in those elevated regions of the mountains of Anahuac. The Toltecs, migrating from their country, Hue Hue Tlapalan or Tlapalan, in the year 544 of our era, arrive at Tolan in the country of Anahuac in 648 and at Tula in 670. Under the reign of the Toltec king Ixtlicuec Ha Huac in 708, the astrologer Hugh Matzin composed the celebrated divine book, the Tlatoani, which contained the history, the mythology, the calendar, and the laws of the nation. Under the reign of the Toltec king Ixtlicuec Ha Huac in 708, the astrologer Hugh Matzin composed the celebrated divine book. The Toltecs appear to have constructed the pyramid of Cholula on the model of the pyramids of Teotihuacan, which last are the most ancient of all, and Sigüenza believes them to be the work of the Olmecs. It was in the time of the Toltec monarchy, or in the ages anterior to it, that the Mexican Buddha, the who? The Mexican Buddha, Quetzalcoatl, appeared, a white man bearded and accompanied by other strangers who wore black garments in the form of casacks. To the 16th century, the people wore these dresses to disguise themselves in festivals. The name of this saint was Cuculca in Yucatan and Camoxli at Tlaxcala. His cloak was spotted with red crosses. High priest of Tula, he founded religious congregations. He ordained sacrifices of flowers and fruit and stopped his ears when he was spoken to of war. His fellow adventurer Hugh Mock was in possession of the secular authority while he himself enjoyed the spiritual power. This form of government was similar to those of Japan and of Cundinamarca, but the first monks, Spanish missionaries, have gravely discussed the question whether Quetzalcoatl was a Carthaginian or an Irishman. Okay, so back down here, it says the same monk was present at Cholula at ceremonies ordered by Quetzalcoatl in which the penitents sacrificed their tongue, ears, and lips. The high priest of Tula had made his first appearance at Panuco. He left Mexico with the intention of returning to Tlapalan, and it was in his journey that he disappeared, not in the north as might have been supposed, but in the east, on the banks of the Rio Huascualco. The nation expected his return during a number of ages. Okay, so such was the Teocalli of Mexico. It was built in the year 1486, Humboldt says. How long it was in building is not said, probably many generations, but the Aztecs for many years used its sites for their religious purposes. I cannot tell where Tlapalan, that the Toltecs came from, was. See, so he don't even know. Nor where Atlan or Teotihuacan near Macan, that that the Aztec and other tribes came from was, though there are many theories about each. No one knows. We know. Watch out. So here now within the papers of the Archaeological Institute of America and American Series number 2, the report of an archaeological tour in Mexico in 1881 by A.F. Bandelier. Okay, and this was published in 1884. Now, this is pretty interesting because what we got going on here is the chirimías is the most popular Indian noise maker, together with the big drum, or Tlapan History, erroneously called Tiponatzli. It is a hollow drum, three-legged, made like a cylindrical barrel, with staves firmly jointed and glued, and covered at the upper end with a piece of tanned leather. Okay? So this drum is what they would use, very similar to Tlapalan, Hue Hue Tlapalan, but Tlapan, Hue Hue. Okay? And then again, here we have it saying depicts the Tlapan Hue Hue as beaten with the hands, and it is formally made out of the trunk of a tree, properly hollowed, over which at one end a deerskin or some other dried hide was stretched. And we spoke of earlier of the individual who used the trunk, the hollowed trunk, right? Now, coming down here in relation to the Historia, right? They say and show by their paintings that in the first year of the 6th series of the 13 of the Chichimecos were at war with Camaxtli and captured his deer, by which he used to conquer. Okay, so they were using deer to conquer, alright? And the reason why he lost it was because while straying across the fields, he met with a female relative of Tezcatlipoca who gave birth to a son by him, whom they named Si-Acaro, Si Occult. In this sixth series of 13 years, they paint how Si-Occult, after he was a youth, fasted for 7 years, wandering alone through the hills and drawing his blood, because the gods made of him a great warrior. And in that period, this Si-Occult began to make war, and was the first chief of Tula, because its inhabitants selected him for their chief on account of his bravery. They said Si-Occult lived until the second year of the 9th series of 13, being chief of Tula. And 4 years previously, he built at Tula a great temple. While he was doing this, Tezcatlipoca came to him and said that towards Honduras, in a place today called Tlapalan, he was to establish his home, and that he should leave Tula and go thither to live and die, and that there they told him to be their god. Now, who is Si-Acaro? We know Si-Acaro to be who other? Quetzalcoatl, okay? Also, it shows here that he was reaching Tlapalan or Tlapalan. He fell sick the same day and died the following day. Okay, here we go. Quetzalcoatl as an Indian deity connected with the earliest phases of Earth's changes, but without any historical figures. Si-Acaro, whom many won't want to identify with Quetzalcoatl as having been crossbred between the stock of Camoxtli, one of the principal gods, and the woman of terrestrial origin, and as an historical personages. Okay. That after being one of the chiefs of the Toltecs, to which dignity he was raised after many years of wanderings and of a very abstinent and secluded life, taunted and tempted by demons, Quetzalcoatl was moved by the arts of Tezcatlipoca to leave Talan for Tlapalan, where he died. His ashes were carried to heaven by handsome birds. The heart followed and became the morning star. So watch out, there we go. Now, the artifices and tricks of Tezcatlipoca, Huitzilopochtli, and Tlacahuapan drove Quetzalcoatl away from Tula to Tlapalan, whither he went in a raft formed of snakes, but it is not known how and in what manner he arrived at Tlapalan. Here another reference. The itinerary preserved by Sahagún names the following places after leaving Tula to conquer, alright? And the reason why he lost it was because while straying across the fields, he met with a female relative of Tezcatlipoca who gave birth to a son by him, whom they named Si-Acaro, Si Occult. In this sixth series of 13 years, they paint how Si-Occult, after he was a youth, fasted for 7 years, wandering alone through the hills and drawing his blood, because the gods made of him a great warrior. And in that period, this Si-Occult began to make war, and was the first chief of Tula, because its inhabitants selected him for their chief on account of his bravery. They said Si-Occult lived until the second year of the 9th series of 13, being chief of Tula. And 4 years previously, he built at Tula a great temple. While he was doing this, Tezcatlipoca came to him and said that towards Honduras, in a place today called Tlapalan, he was to establish his home, and that he should leave Tula and go thither to live and die, and that there they told him to be their god. Also, it shows here that he was reaching Tlapalan or Tlapalan. He fell sick the same day and died the following day. Okay, here we go. Quetzalcoatl as an Indian deity connected with the earliest phases of Earth's changes, but without any historical figures. Si-Acaro, whom many won't want to identify with Quetzalcoatl as having been crossbred between the stock of Camoxtli, one of the principal gods, and the woman of terrestrial origin, and as an historical personages. That after being one of the chiefs of the Toltecs, to which dignity he was raised after many years of wanderings and of a very abstinent and secluded life, taunted and tempted by demons, Quetzalcoatl was moved by the arts of Tezcatlipoca to leave Talan for Tlapalan, where he died. His ashes were carried to heaven by handsome birds. The heart followed and became the morning star. So watch out, there we go. Now, the artifices and tricks of Tezcatlipoca, Huitzilopochtli, and Huepan drove Quetzalcoatl away from Tula to Tlapalan, whither he went in a raft formed of snakes, but it is not known how and in what manner he arrived at Tlapalan. Here another reference. The itinerary preserved by Sahagún names the following places after leaving Tula: Hue Hue Tlapalan, Pa, the Cumbre between the two volcanoes, and finally Chalco. Thence he moved towards Tlapalan, which place Sahagún locates on the seacoast. In order to reach Chalco from the Cumbre, he must have passed through Cholula. Another reference. Such a strife, it appears, continued to follow him even to Cholula, for all the authorities are unanimous in assigning to the close of his earthly career another locality, namely the mythical land of Tlapalan. It ain't mythical though, that's the whole point. They saying it's mythical, but it ain't mythical, it just they don't want to reference it. I do not feel justified in speculating upon the whereabouts of Tlapalan, and I will only say that the most of the authorities place it on the seacoast and generally on the Gulf of Mexico, but the Zumarraga manuscript and the Hue Hue Tlapalan annals make him die there, and Motolania himself is silent as to his departure by sea. That story is told in full, first by Sahagún, Talan, and Tobar. Now we have a footnote. Let's see what the footnote says about it. Without attaching any importance to it, I will suggest that Tlapalan might be derived from Tlapali, color, Molina vocabulary. It would then mean the land of paint. Such a designation might imply vegetable as well as mineral paints because the Indians use both. Now diving into this book here, the religious sentiment, its sources and aim, a contribution to the science and philosophy of religion by Daniel G. Brenton. Okay, and this one was published in 1876. So within this book we only have looks like it's one reference to Tlapalan, but it says the garden eastward in Eden of the Pentateuch, the land of Talan, or Tlapalan in Aztec myth, the islands of the Hesperides, the rose garden of Faridun, and a score of other legends attest with what strong yearning man seeks in the past, the picture of that perfect felicity which the present never yields. So that's pretty big right there in relation to that reference itself. Just due to the fact that the garden eastward in Eden of the Pentateuch, the land of Talan, or Tlapalan in Aztec myth, the islands of the Hesperides, the rose garden of Faridun, and a score of other legends attest with what strong yearning man seeks in the past, the picture of that perfect felicity which the present never yields. So straight referencing Talan or Tlapalan as the Eden, the amazing place in which all was lost. So that's pretty amazing there in that regard. So Hue Tlapalan, watch out now. Now in the book Prehistoric America by the Marquis, let me zoom this one in, y'all, sorry. Marquis de Nada Ilac, edited by W.H. Dahl in 1884. So right off the bat, going into Tlapalan, we have a footnote reference here. The most ancient Mexican traditions speak of a great empire in the north. Great empire, yes sir, to which the name of Hue Hue Tlapalan was given. We shall have to recur to this question again. Now, Agassiz and Lyell lead those who insist upon the great antiquity of the American continent. The latter believes the Mississippi to have flowed along its present bed for more than 100,000 years.
The latter believes the Mississippi to have flowed along its present bed for more than 100,000 years.
Watch out. The real Nile is the Mississippi, okay? Hue Hue Tlapalan, okay? which Agassiz, if no one's familiar with Agassiz, Agassiz was a Harvard professor, and he came out and said, or he was a Harvard geologist, and he stated that America was the first to rise out of the depths of the ocean. Well, again, I am coming to understand we got the biggest supervolcano in the world, which is Yellowstone National Park. Okay? Alright, so coming up to another reference here. The ancient American races preserved the tradition of a distinct migrations in their hieroglyphs and pictographs. According to these traditions, it was from a country situated on the north, or the northwest, that the Nahuals came. This is the version of all Spanish historians, and we may mention amongst them Duran, Vetia, Torquemada, Betancourt, and Clagiverio. Bancroft, however, thinks these people came from the south. We were obliged to add that his reasons for this opinion do not appear to us conclusive. So, again, trying to bring it down south is not conclusive. This country was called Hue Hue Tlapalan in the Popol Vuh, Tulan Zuiwa by other historians. Okay, so we got another one by other historians saying Tulan Zuiwa. Okay, must be the same as the country of Ameke Makan, the birthplace of the Chichimecs.
Ameke Makan, the birthplace of the Chichimecs.
Here we have, down here it says in the footnote, an attempt has been made to identify Tulan Zuiwa with the 7 caves that play such an important part in Aztec traditions. Again, Tulan Zuiwa was known as Hue Hue Tlapalan. Alright? This has always been very interesting to me. I've recently posted this up on my Instagram. And the reason I believe this is Quetzalcoatl. Yep, Quetzalcoatl. And if you notice, look at the symbols. Where do these reference to? What language is this? I haven't been able to see this or reference this or even find anything yet. But look at the pose as well. The pose is pretty crazy to me. We have the pointed cap. We have the sun or star or sun rays behind him. And I still have been unable to figure out where these symbols are coming from. So if anybody can be of assistance or help in that regard, that'd be amazing in trying to relate where these symbols come from. After a long and arduous journeys, their descendants settled in Hue Hue Tlapalan, a fertile country and pleasant to live in, adds the historian. Again, Bancroft gives a summary of the whole of this history, which is legendary rather than serious. Of course, they don't want to give it any historical value here. Ixtlioxochitl, following in the trail of his priestly instructor, says that in the year 5097 from the creation of a meeting of astronomers, again this was in Hue Hue Tlapalan, we already went through this, took place in Hue Hue Tlapalan, and it was they who fixed the divisions of time which lasted until the conquest. Professor Valentini, the cartoonist of Mayan history, places this change in the divisions of time in the year 29 BC. Both of these estimates are, perhaps it is needless to say, more or less hypothetical. Yeah, okay, buddy. All right, buddy, if you say so. Yep. Still. And again, down here in the index, Hue Hue Tlapalan, a great empire in the north according to the Mexican traditions. Okay, so in their traditions, it's already known. Okay, now apparently within this book as well, they're going in regards to Illinois and the mound at Cahokia. So maybe we can dive into this a little bit more to see what they're speaking of in relation to just a lot of these mounds. Actually, it seems as though they've got quite a bit of references in relation to the mounds in this one. Okay, so diving into this one, let's see what we got here. So this one's going to be The Career of the God Idea in History by Hudson Tuttle, author of Arcana of Nature, Origin and Antiquity of Men. And, well, where's the publication date? Looks like we got it in the Library of Congress in 1871. Entered into Congress in the year of 1869. Okay? So it looks like we only have one reference in this book, but it says, compelled to abandon the country by which the wrath of the principal gods, he stopped at Cholula, where a magnificent temple was erected, the interesting ruins of which are still to be seen. Then he stepped into his wizard skiff formed of serpent skins and departed over the Mexican Gulf to the fabled land of Tlapalan, first telling his people that he and his descendants would return. This superstition, which saw in the advent of the Spaniards its fulfillment, was a potent cause of national extinction. So diving into this next book here, The Ancient City, discovery of the city that Cain built, and discovery of the most ancient site of the city of Thebes, and the lost Europa, the Princess of Tyre, and the origin of the Swiss lake dwellings by J.M. Woosley. Okay, and this was published in 1911. Again, only one reference here in relation to Hue Hue Tlapalan, but it says the Ultima Thule was an island at the uttermost extremity of the world. It was a floating, shifting island that lay beneath the waves of the sea, sometimes called land under the waves. It sometimes rises to the surface and enjoys perpetual summer and perennial verdure and fruits. Its coast was surrounded on one side by a wall of rock in which the griffin built her nest. It was a magical island. Its inhabitants were magicians. Its fruits possessed the power of life and death. Its waters healed. It was visited by magic or charmed stones carried on the wings of eagles or griffins, waifs and strays of Celtic tradition. Quetzalcoatl, the Toltec civilizer after the reign of peace in the Golden Age, retired to the sea pursued by his persecutor, the Avenger, and there embarked in a vessel made of serpent skins, bound for the sacred isle of Tlapalan. Hasisadra, the Babylonian Noah. The what? Hasisadra, the Babylonian Noah, lived in a charmed island, an Elysian field at the mouth of the river. There he received and healed the hero Gilgamesh. Now this book here seems to have a lot of different things going on here. It says in the very beginning of the book that they found the exact location of Noah. Okay. Don't know what to say there. We have one reference on Tlapalan, but that's it. Checking out one more thing here in Hue. Of course, I'm always looking to see if I can find any Hue or people named Hue. And then again, he came to a handsome youth dressed as a merchant selling pepper pods and presented himself before the princess, the daughter of the king Hue, whom he seduced and overturned law and order and set up vice and immortality. Okay. So this is in speaking in regards to Tezcatlipoca and how they rose against Quetzalcoatl. Now, just a quick little offshoot here. I thought this was a little bit interesting while I'm searching of some things here. It says that the black giants build the black moon, but the royal arc mason alone, that god of light, can set the keystone of the arc, which is the ring of the new moon. The ancients well understood the subject, for they call the builders Cyclops, or circle-eyed, having an eye in the middle of their forehead, who are the giant builders, sun and moon. So, jumping into this last reference for Hue Hue Tlapalan on this episode, the Mal Mystic, the Toltec. Mals Mystic, the Toltec, and the Cavaliers of the Cross by W.W. Fosdick. And this was published in 1851. Now, coming into it straight off the bat, just looking for Hue Hue Tlapalan, they never deliberated upon making war without imploring the protection of this god with prayers and sacrifices, and offered up a great number of victims to him than any of the other gods. Huitzil Lopochtli was the chief god of the Mexicans, Tezcucans, and even their constant enemy, the Tlaxcalans. But in Cholula, Quetzalcoatl held the primary position. With the Mexicans, he was the god of the air, the divinity of Halcyon days, who embarked after passing through Mexico and sojourning in Cholula in his wizard skiff for the fabled Tlapalan. Okay, so you see here we got a different spelling, Tlapalan. He had a white skin, dark hair, and a long beard, and a face of great gentleness and beauty. Okay, moving on to the second reference here, which is within a poem, it seems though. But it says Quetzalcoatl wanders now in shadowy Tlapalan. When he comes, the knee shall bow of each proud Tlaxcalan, and when he again appears from that unknown region. Dear woman's health shall greet his ears from voices of a legion. And the last reference, so saying Quetzalcoatl stepped into his wizard skiff and bored away for Tlapalan. So again, just going over everything, it's really interesting that we're finding all these references in relation to Hue Hue Tlapalan. I just find it very interesting that I've been really the only one to kind of speak about this recently. It's pretty amazing to me that a lot of more people are not speaking about this, but it's at least starting to pop up a little bit more than it was when I would search Hue Hue Tlapalan. Before I started mentioning things, not a lot popped up, and now we're starting to see a little bit more references pop up into this. So very interesting. I just find it fascinating that this has not been spoken of much at all, even though the references are there and leads back to North America, especially the Ohio, Mississippi. But as we get deeper and deeper into Boborg's work and C.S. Rafinesque's work, I think we're going to find a lot more of this, and we're going to start to really find that Hue Hue Tlapalan is definitely a big part of this mystery. And I really think that if you haven't gone already into the older video that I've already done in relation to this, America's the True World, Hue Hue Tlapalan, this is a big deal. And go through this other one that I just did about 4 weeks ago, as you can see here, and really understand that we're going through these things and we're finding references like crazy to Hue Hue Tlapalan, and we're going to continue to find more. And as this gets deeper, we're going to figure out these mysteries. So I appreciate all of y'all. Until the next one, y'all. Peace and blessings.